She had always loved the sound of a piano, the way each note could seem to reach straight into the heart. But she had never played in front of anyone. Her practice was always quiet, in the small corner of a room that smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. She would sit for hours, fingers hovering above the keys, imagining melodies, but never daring to share them with anyone. Music was her private world, a place where she could be herself without judgment. One afternoon, a teacher she had admired for a long time handed her a sheet of music. The melody was simple, almost plain, nothing like the complicated pieces she had always admired. She looked at it skeptically. The notes seemed ordinary, nothing that would impress anyone. Yet there was something about it that made her pause. It was gentle, soft, and somehow inviting. She felt a strange curiosity about what she could do with it. She placed her fingers on the keys, following the sheet carefully. The first few notes felt awkward. Her fingers stumbled, unsure of where to go. She tried again and again, each attempt bringing a little more confidence. Slowly, the melody began to make sense, and she felt a small thrill at how the sound filled the quiet room. It was not just notes on a page anymore. It was music, something that could speak and move. Despite the progress, doubt kept creeping in. She wondered if anyone would ever find it interesting. She had always admired performers who could play complex pieces with speed and passion. This simple melody seemed almost too easy, too ordinary to matter. But there was a part of her that refused to give up, that whispered she could do something more with it. She decided to let herself explore, to see where the music could take her if she allowed herself to feel it fully. Days passed, and she returned to the piano every afternoon. Sometimes she would play the melody exactly as written, carefully following each note. Other times, she would let her fingers wander, experimenting with rhythms and small variations. She discovered that a slight change in timing could make a note feel warmer, or a pause could make the melody breathe. She began to realize that the music was not fixed. It could be shaped, molded, and turned into something unique. Her connection to the melody grew deeper. It was not just about learning notes or playing correctly. It became a conversation. Each time she played, she felt as if the piano was responding to her, listening to her feelings, and echoing them back in sound. She laughed quietly at herself when a mistake created something unexpectedly beautiful, a small accidental chord that added depth to the tune. She began to see that perfection was not the goal. Expression was. Friends and family would sometimes pass by the room, catching snippets of the music. Their comments were gentle encouragements, but she often shrugged them off. It was not for them. The piano was her companion, her way of understanding herself. Yet, each time she heard someone pause to listen, she felt a flicker of pride, a quiet hope that maybe one day the melody could touch others as it had touched her. One evening, as the sun was setting and the room was bathed in a soft orange glow, she sat at the piano and let herself play without any plan. The melody flowed naturally, her fingers moving with confidence. She noticed small details she had never realized before, the way certain notes lingered, the way a pause could change the mood entirely. She felt a sense of freedom, as if the music had opened a door inside her, revealing a space she had never known. In those moments, she understood that the melody was more than a set of notes. It was a seed waiting to grow. She could feel it stretching, reaching for something beyond the sheet of paper. She did not know yet what it would become, but the possibilities excited her. The simple tune had become a challenge, a puzzle, and an opportunity to create something that was entirely her own. She started to notice how the music affected her mood. Some days, it made her feel light and happy, as if the world had become brighter. Other days, it brought out a deep, quiet melancholy, a reflection on moments that had passed. She learned to embrace all these emotions, to let the piano be a mirror of her inner world. Each practice session became a journey, a way to understand herself better through sound. As she grew more confident, she began to imagine what it would be like to share the melody. The thought made her nervous. She had never performed for anyone before, but there was a spark inside her that wanted to reach out, to let the music travel beyond the room and touch someone else. The idea of creating a moment, however small, that could connect her feelings with another person was thrilling. Even as she practiced, she kept a journal beside the piano. She would write down what she felt after each session, the small discoveries, the frustrations, and the joys. It helped her see her progress, not just in playing the melody but in understanding herself. The simple tune had become a mirror, reflecting not only her musical growth but also her personal journey. One day, she realized she could play the melody without looking at the sheet music. Her fingers remembered the notes naturally, moving with a confidence that surprised her. She felt a sense of mastery, but it was not the kind of pride that comes from showing off. It was quiet, deep, and satisfying. The melody had become a part of her, and she had become a part of it. With each passing week, she added subtle touches. A longer pause here, a softer note there, a slight variation that brought out a hidden emotion. The melody was no longer just a simple tune. It was alive, breathing, and full of expression. She started to think of it as her own creation, a small piece of art that had grown from something ordinary into something meaningful. The idea of performing still lingered in the back of her mind. She did not rush it. For now, she focused on exploring every nuance, understanding the depths of the melody. She imagined a stage, a quiet room, a small audience, but she let these visions remain gentle, like whispers in the distance. The music was hers first, and that was enough. One rainy afternoon, as the drops tapped softly against the window, she played the melody slowly, letting each note resonate. The room seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment, she felt as if time had stopped. It was not about impressing anyone. It was about the pure experience of creating and feeling. In that silence, she realized that the melody had become a companion, a friend that would guide her through the next steps of her journey. By the end of the first part of her journey, she had learned something important. Talent alone was not enough. Curiosity, patience, and a willingness to explore were what transformed a simple melody into something special. She had discovered the joy of music as a living, breathing expression of her own emotions. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a gateway to understanding herself and the world around her. And in that quiet, gentle way, she had planted the seeds for a moment that could one day become a true moment of glory. After weeks of quiet practice, she began to feel the melody flowing naturally through her fingers. Yet, with progress came challenges. Some days, her hands refused to cooperate, her mind distracted by worries and doubts. She would sit at the piano, take a deep breath, and start again, determined not to let frustration win. She noticed that each session had its own rhythm, some days easier than others, but all equally important in shaping her understanding of the music. She began to experiment more boldly, adding slight variations to the rhythm, testing small pauses, and emphasizing different notes. Sometimes the results were beautiful. Other times they sounded awkward and clumsy. But she welcomed both outcomes, realizing that mistakes were not failures, they were lessons. Each error taught her something new about timing, touch, and emotional expression. She started to see the melody as a living thing that could respond to her moods, rather than just a set of written notes. The struggle was not only with the music but with her own confidence. The thought of performing even for a small group made her heart race. She feared judgment and the possibility of disappointing anyone who might listen. Even imagining herself on a stage caused a wave of anxiety. She would pause, close her eyes, and remind herself that this journey was hers alone. The piano had become a safe space, a place where she could experiment without fear. One afternoon, she decided to record herself playing. The first few takes were shaky. Her fingers stumbled over a few notes, and she became aware of how tense she sounded. Listening to the playback, she cringed at the mistakes but also noticed something she had not before. The emotion in her playing, even in imperfect moments, was powerful. It moved her, and she realized it could move others too. The recording became a tool for reflection, allowing her to hear progress she had not recognized in real time. As she experimented, she began to notice patterns in her own playing. Certain combinations of notes felt natural, flowing easily under her fingers, while others required more attention. She found that she could emphasize specific notes to create tension and release, turning a simple melody into a small story. The idea fascinated her. Music was no longer just an arrangement of sounds. It had become a language, capable of expressing feelings she could not put into words. Her connection to the piano deepened with every session. She started to play not only with her fingers but with her entire body, swaying slightly with the rhythm, letting her emotions guide her movements. Each note became a reflection of her mood, and the room seemed to respond, holding a quiet resonance that mirrored her inner state. Even when she played softly, the music carried weight, a presence that filled the space around her. Despite these small victories, doubt persisted. Some days, she would sit down, stare at the sheet music, and feel overwhelmed. The melody that had once felt simple now seemed daunting in its potential. Could she truly make it something extraordinary? Was she capable of expressing the depth of feeling she sensed within her? These questions haunted her, but instead of discouraging her, they pushed her to try harder, to explore more, and to search for her own voice within the music. During these moments of struggle, she often remembered the encouragement of her teacher. There had been a quiet belief in their eyes, a confidence that she could create something special if she allowed herself to experiment. She held onto that memory like a lifeline, reminding herself that growth often comes through challenge, and that even the simplest pieces of music could become remarkable in the hands of someone willing to explore. One rainy evening, she decided to try a different approach. Instead of following the sheet music exactly, she allowed herself to improvise around the melody. She added small flourishes, lingered on certain notes, and varied the tempo. At first, the changes felt awkward and unsure, but gradually, the music began to take on a new character. The simple melody stretched and grew, revealing hidden emotions she had never noticed before. She felt a thrill of discovery, a sense of freedom she had never experienced while playing before. This experimentation also revealed her resilience. Each mistake, each awkward variation, became a stepping stone rather than a setback. She learned to listen more carefully, to respond to the music as it unfolded beneath her fingers. The melody became a conversation, one where she could ask questions and receive answers in sound. This realization gave her confidence, and she began to see the piano as a partner in her journey, not just an instrument. Her friends and family began to notice subtle changes in her demeanor. She was calmer, more focused, and carried a quiet sense of purpose. When she played, even in private, there was a new confidence in her posture and expression. The music had become a way for her to process her own emotions, a method of understanding herself that words could not capture. Each day at the piano became a ritual, a chance to explore, reflect, and grow. At times, the struggle became almost overwhelming. There were moments when her hands hurt from long practice sessions, when her mind felt tired, and when the melody seemed to resist her control. But she learned to accept these moments as part of the process. She discovered that patience was as important as skill, and that persistence could turn frustration into progress. Every small improvement, every fleeting moment of beauty in her playing, became a reward for her effort. She also began to observe the effect of music on her emotions more closely. Playing slowly, she could summon a sense of calm and reflection. Playing with energy, she could feel joy and excitement surge through her body. She experimented with these contrasts, learning to convey different moods through subtle shifts in tempo, volume, and touch. The melody, though simple, became a canvas for her creativity and self-expression. As the days passed, she started to imagine what it would be like to share the music. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She pictured a small gathering of listeners, or perhaps a recording that others could hear. The thought of opening herself to others made her nervous, but also gave her a sense of purpose. She realized that the melody had grown beyond herself. It had the potential to touch other people in ways she could not yet predict. One quiet night, she sat at the piano and played the melody slowly, allowing herself to feel every note fully. The room was dark except for a single lamp, casting warm light over the keys. She noticed how the melody could evoke memories, stir emotions, and create a sense of connection even when she was alone. This understanding made her more determined to explore it further, to discover every nuance and possibility hidden within its simplicity. With each session, she gained confidence, not in grand gestures or technical mastery, but in her ability to communicate through music. She realized that the power of a melody was not in its complexity, but in the sincerity and depth of feeling it could convey. This insight became a guiding principle in her practice. To play with honesty, to let her emotions lead, and to embrace the imperfections that made the music human. By the end of this phase, she had transformed her approach to the melody. What had started as a simple tune had become a dynamic exploration, full of subtle variations and personal expression. She had learned to overcome self-doubt, to embrace mistakes as opportunities, and to find joy in the process of discovery. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a mirror reflecting her growth. She understood now that the journey was far from over. The struggles had taught her resilience and creativity, and she knew that the next steps would require even more courage and experimentation. Yet, for the first time, she felt ready to move beyond private practice, to imagine sharing the music with others, and to consider the possibility that this simple melody could one day become something extraordinary. The seed of her moment of glory had been planted, nurtured through struggle, patience, and discovery. Waiting for the right time to bloom, weeks of practice and exploration had begun to pay off. She could play the melody without hesitation now, but more importantly, she was starting to feel it in a way that went beyond notes on a page. She realized that the simple tune had hidden depths she had never noticed before. A slight pause here, a softer touch there, and suddenly the music seemed to breathe with life. She felt as if she were discovering the soul of the melody itself. One afternoon, she sat quietly, listening to the sound of her own playing. Something shifted. Without realizing it, she had added a delicate variation, a subtle twist that transformed the melody entirely. It was not flashy or complicated, but it added a new dimension. She paused mid-piece, struck by the discovery. The melody felt different now, richer and more expressive. She realized that this small change had unlocked something she had been searching for all along. Excited by the breakthrough, she began to explore further. She experimented with tempo, letting some sections linger longer than before, and adding gentle emphasis on notes that had previously gone unnoticed. The melody responded to her emotions, shaping itself around her feelings. Each session became a journey, where she would start with familiar patterns and end up somewhere completely unexpected, discovering nuances that made the music uniquely hers. She began to notice how the music connected to her own life experiences. The notes seemed to echo her memories, her joys, her moments of doubt and courage. She felt the melody speaking to her, revealing emotions she had kept hidden. Playing became an act of storytelling, each phrase a sentence in the narrative of her own life. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a confidant, and a mirror reflecting her inner world. One evening, she decided to play the melody for a close friend who had always encouraged her music. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat at the piano, unsure how the music would be received. But as soon as the first notes filled the room, she noticed something extraordinary. Her friend's eyes glistened with emotion, and a smile spread across their face. The melody, once simple and ordinary, had become a language that could touch others, conveying feelings without words. That moment gave her a rush of confidence. She realized that her breakthrough was not just about technical skill or creativity. It was about connecting with others through music. She began to imagine performing more publicly, sharing the melody with a wider audience. The thought was thrilling but also daunting. She knew she would need courage and preparation, but the spark of possibility ignited a new determination within her. She returned to her practice with renewed focus, refining the variations she had discovered. She experimented with dynamics, letting some notes float gently while others struck with strength and conviction. She paid attention to the transitions, making sure the melody flowed naturally from one section to the next. Each adjustment felt like sculpting, shaping the music into something alive and expressive. During this process, she discovered a deeper truth about creativity. The melody had started as something simple, handed to her without expectation, yet it had become a canvas for her own ideas and emotions. She realized that true artistry was not always about complexity or grandeur, but about the ability to breathe life into something ordinary, transforming it into something extraordinary through imagination and care. She also began to feel a sense of responsibility toward the music. It was no longer just a private exploration. It had the power to move others. She wanted to honor the melody, to let it shine in its full potential. This awareness made her practice more intentional, more thoughtful. She approached each session with the question, how can I express the heart of this melody in the most genuine way possible? As she continued, she noticed subtle changes in herself. She was more patient, more observant, and more in tune with her own emotions. The process of discovering the melody's depth had taught her to embrace uncertainty and to value the journey over the destination. She understood that moments of frustration and doubt were essential steps toward growth, and that breakthroughs often came when least expected. One day, she experimented with a small improvisation around the melody. She added delicate chords, gentle pauses, and a slight change in rhythm that gave the tune a new voice. As she played, she felt a surge of exhilaration. The music had become an extension of herself, expressing thoughts and feelings she had never been able to articulate. The simple melody had blossomed into something personal, vibrant, and alive. She began to visualize performing the melody in front of an audience. She imagined the room quiet, all eyes on her, and the music flowing from her fingers, carrying her emotions to the listeners. The thought made her nervous but also inspired. She realized that her breakthrough was not complete until she had shared it, allowing the music to create a connection beyond herself. In her private practice, she continued refining the piece. She experimented with tempo, trying slow and reflective passages alongside sections that moved with gentle energy. She discovered how small variations in touch could change the emotional impact, how pauses could create anticipation, and how dynamics could tell a story without words. Each session was a lesson in subtlety and expression, teaching her that the power of music often lay in its quiet moments. Through this exploration, she also learned to trust her intuition. Rather than rigidly following the sheet music, she allowed herself to respond to the melody in real time, letting her feelings guide her choices. She discovered that these intuitive decisions often created the most profound moments in her playing, moments that felt spontaneous, honest, and deeply moving. Her breakthrough also strengthened her sense of self. She realized that creativity was not just about producing impressive results, but about exploring, experimenting, and taking risks. She had turned a simple melody into a personal expression, and in doing so, she had grown as a musician and as a person. She began to see that the courage to explore, to embrace mistakes, and to trust herself was just as important as the technical skills she had developed. One evening, after a long session, she sat back and listened to the melody she had shaped. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment that was both humbling and uplifting. The melody, once simple and unassuming, had transformed into something meaningful and expressive. She knew that this was just the beginning, and that the next steps would require even more courage and creativity. But for the first time, she felt confident that she had discovered her own voice within the music. She reflected on the journey so far, the long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, the small victories, and the breakthrough that had changed everything. Each step had been necessary, each challenge had taught her something valuable, and each variation had brought her closer to understanding the true potential of the melody. She realized that this was the essence of growth: patience, exploration, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. The breakthrough had also given her hope. She felt a quiet certainty that the melody could reach others, that it had the power to create moments of connection, emotion, and inspiration. The simple tune had become a symbol of her own journey, a reminder that even ordinary things could be transformed into something extraordinary with care, creativity, and heart. As the day ended and the room grew quiet, she placed her hands gently on the keys and let the melody flow once more. Each note carried a piece of her experience. Each pause reflected her growth, and each variation told a story that was uniquely hers. She understood that the music was no longer just a melody. It was a living expression of her journey, and it had opened the door to the next chapter of her story. A chapter where her creation could touch the hearts of others and create a true moment of glory. The day finally came when she decided to share the melody she had nurtured for so long. It was a small gathering, nothing extravagant, just a few friends and family who had quietly watched her journey from the beginning. Even though the audience was familiar, her nerves were real. She sat at the piano, hands hovering above the keys, heart pounding. For a moment, she considered backing out. But then she reminded herself of the weeks of practice, the breakthroughs, and the personal growth she had achieved. She took a deep breath and let her fingers touch the keys. The first notes floated gently through the room. The melody, once simple and quiet, now carried a depth and warmth that seemed to fill every corner. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her, and for the first time, she felt entirely at one with the piano. Each variation she had discovered, every subtle pause and delicate emphasis, was present, weaving a tapestry of sound that was uniquely hers. As she played, she noticed the reactions of the people around her. Eyes widened slightly, and a few heads tilted, as if leaning closer to catch the nuances of the music. She could feel the attention, but it did not make her tense. Instead, it encouraged her to play with even more sincerity. The melody was no longer confined to the room. It had become a bridge, connecting her feelings to the emotions of the listeners. Midway through the piece, a particularly delicate section required complete focus. She allowed herself to linger on each note, feeling its resonance in the quiet space. The room seemed to pause, holding its breath with her. She realized in that moment that the music had power, that it could command attention and evoke emotion without a single word spoken. The realization thrilled her, filling her with a sense of purpose and pride. The final notes approached, soft and lingering. She played them slowly, letting each one fade into silence, allowing the audience to absorb the emotion carried by the melody. When the last note disappeared, there was a moment of quiet, a pause where time seemed suspended. Then the room filled with gentle applause, a few murmurs of admiration, and the unmistakable warmth of appreciation. She opened her eyes, and the smiles, the glistening eyes, and the nods of approval confirmed what she had already begun to feel. She had created something that mattered. After the performance, a friend approached her quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That was beautiful," they said. "I could feel everything you were thinking and feeling. It was like the music was speaking directly to me." The words touched her deeply. She realized that all the struggle, the late nights, the mistakes, and the endless practice had culminated in this very moment. The simple melody had become a vehicle for connection, a way to share her inner world with others. She spent the rest of the evening talking about the process, describing how she had discovered variations and how the melody had grown through experimentation. Her audience listened intently, genuinely interested in the journey as much as the music itself. She found herself smiling, relaxed now, realizing that sharing her music was not about perfection or impressing others. It was about honesty, expression, and the courage to reveal a part of herself. As the room emptied and the quiet returned, she sat alone at the piano once more. The notes she played now were different, freer, and more experimental. The sense of achievement did not make her complacent. It inspired her to continue exploring, to push the boundaries of the melody even further. She understood that this moment of glory was not a final destination but a milestone, a proof that she could turn simplicity into something extraordinary through dedication and heart. In the days that followed, the experience stayed with her. Each time she played, she remembered the warmth of the audience, the way the music had resonated, and the silent understanding shared without words. She noticed a newfound confidence in her posture, her approach to practice, and her willingness to take risks in her music. The melody was no longer just a piece she practiced in private. It had become a symbol of her growth, her courage, and her ability to touch the hearts of others. She also began to think about the future. The performance had opened a door, suggesting possibilities she had not considered before. Perhaps she could perform again, reach a wider audience, or even create new pieces that carried her voice forward. The sense of potential was thrilling, but she reminded herself to take each step with care, to continue valuing the process as much as the result. The journey that had started with a simple piano melody was far from over. Even as she imagined these possibilities, she never forgot the quiet moments of practice that had brought her here. Each day spent experimenting, learning, and reflecting had built the foundation for this moment of glory. She realized that without the struggles, the mistakes, and the discoveries, the performance would not have carried the depth and sincerity it did. The journey itself had been essential, shaping both the music and her as a person. One rainy evening, she returned to the piano and played the melody slowly, savoring each note. She remembered the nervous excitement before the performance, the quiet pride afterward, and the sense of connection that had followed. The music felt alive, resonating with both her past experiences and the possibilities of the future. She understood that the true power of the melody lay not in its complexity, but in the sincerity and care with which it was expressed. As she finished playing, she leaned back, letting the silence fill the room. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy that came from knowing she had transformed something simple into something meaningful. The applause, the smiles, and the emotional connection were affirmations of her journey, but the greatest satisfaction came from within. The knowledge that she had trusted herself, explored her creativity, and allowed the melody to become an extension of her own voice. In the quiet that followed, she made a promise to herself. She would continue to play, to experiment, and to share her music. She would honor the melody that had started it all, and she would embrace the new ideas and discoveries that awaited her. The moment of glory had shown her what was possible, but it had also taught her that the real reward was in the journey. The practice, the struggle, the breakthroughs, and the courage to share her heart through music. She understood now that the power of music was not just in impressing others or achieving recognition. It was in its ability to connect, to communicate emotions that words could not, and to reveal the depths of both the performer and the listener. The simple melody had become a bridge between her inner world and those around her, creating a shared experience that was intimate, profound, and unforgettable. As she left the piano that night, she felt a sense of peace and excitement intertwined. The performance had been a milestone, a moment of glory that validated her dedication and creativity. Yet, she also knew that it was just the beginning of a much larger journey. The melody would continue to evolve, just as she would continue to grow, explore, and discover new ways to express herself through music. And with that thought, she stepped into the future, ready to embrace every note, every pause, and every possibility that awaited. After the performance, life settled into a calm rhythm, but she felt different inside. The music had changed her, and the experience of sharing it left a deep impression on her heart. She returned to her piano, not with the pressure of preparing for an audience, but with a quiet sense of curiosity and excitement. Each session became an exploration, a chance to see how the melody could grow and evolve further. She knew that the journey was ongoing and that the possibilities were endless. She began to write down her thoughts as she played, capturing the emotions each variation evoked. The simple melody had become a journal of feelings, a map of her growth both as a musician and as a person. She noticed patterns in her own emotions, moments of hesitation, bursts of creativity, and quiet reflections, and how these were reflected in the music. The piano had become a mirror, showing her not just her skill, but the depth of her own experiences and responses. Her confidence continued to grow. She realized that sharing music was not about perfection or applause, but about connection. Even in small settings, the melodies she played could touch others, and this understanding motivated her to experiment further. She began to explore other simple tunes, wondering if she could find new ways to express emotion through modest, unassuming pieces. Each new melody became a playground for creativity, a place to test ideas and feelings. One afternoon, she noticed a young child watching her as she played. The child's eyes were wide with curiosity, absorbing every note and movement. She smiled and invited the child to touch the keys. The child hesitated, then pressed a few notes, creating a small, uneven sound. She laughed softly, encouraging the child to explore freely. Watching someone else experience music in its raw form reminded her of how she had started, with uncertainty, curiosity, and a willingness to learn. It was a moment of shared discovery, and she felt grateful for it. Her performances, though still small and informal, began to gain attention. Friends recommended her to others, and she received invitations to play at local gatherings and community events. Each opportunity brought a mix of excitement and nerves. She was no longer just experimenting privately. She was sharing her growth with the world. Yet, she remained grounded, remembering the quiet hours spent with the piano, exploring the nuances of a simple melody, and learning to trust herself. As she continued, she discovered that music could be a tool for healing and reflection. Playing certain notes could bring comfort when she was tired or anxious. Other variations inspired energy and motivation. She began to pay attention to how the act of playing affected her emotions and how it could influence the feelings of those listening. Music became a language she could speak fluently, conveying thoughts and emotions without needing words. Her journey also taught her patience. Not every session brought a breakthrough, and some days felt frustratingly slow. But she learned to embrace the process, understanding that growth often came gradually. The small victories, the discovery of a new variation, the subtle shift in tempo, or the clarity of a note, became moments of joy and celebration. She realized that patience was essential, both with the music and with herself. One day, she returned to the original melody that had started it all. She played it slowly, reflecting on how far she had come. The notes felt familiar, yet different, enriched by her experiences, shaped by her experiments, and infused with her emotions. She felt a quiet pride, knowing that the simple tune had become a personal expression, a testament to her dedication, creativity, and courage. The melody was more than music now. It was a story, a journey, and a reflection of her growth. She began to teach herself new techniques, exploring the piano's range and discovering ways to create more complex textures. Yet, she never lost sight of the simplicity that had first inspired her. She understood that depth did not always require complexity. Sometimes, the most powerful expression came from the simplest forms. Her approach to music became a balance between experimentation and appreciation for the beauty of minimalism. Through these experiences, she realized that music was not just about performance. It was about understanding, expression, and connection. The lessons she learned at the piano carried into other areas of life. Patience, creativity, courage, and the importance of self-expression. She noticed that she approached challenges with more calmness, explored ideas with more openness, and connected with others with more empathy. The piano had taught her not only about music, but about living fully and sincerely. Over time, she found opportunities to share her journey through small performances, recordings, and casual gatherings. Each time, she approached the music with sincerity and care, allowing her emotions to guide her playing. She discovered that even when the audience was quiet, the connection was still present. The melody could create moments of reflection, joy, and understanding, bridging the gap between her experience and the experiences of others. She also began to collaborate with other musicians, discovering new ways to blend sounds and ideas. These experiences expanded her understanding of music, introducing her to rhythms, harmonies, and expressions she had not encountered before. She appreciated how collaboration could inspire new ideas while still allowing her to maintain her personal voice. The journey that had started with a simple piano melody had grown into a broader exploration of music as a language and a form of communication. Reflecting on her growth, she understood that the moment of glory she had experienced was not an endpoint. It was a milestone, a point of realization that effort, courage, and dedication could transform something simple into something meaningful. The real reward lay in the ongoing journey, exploring, experimenting, sharing, and connecting through music. She felt gratitude for every mistake, every breakthrough, and every moment spent at the piano, knowing that each step had shaped her into the musician and person she had become. Even as she looked to the future, she remained connected to the melody that had started it all. It was a reminder of where she had begun, of the curiosity and courage that had guided her through the early stages of discovery. She understood that simplicity could carry profound beauty, and that every note had the potential to express emotion, tell a story, and create connection. The melody was a companion, a teacher, and a reflection of her journey. In quiet moments, she would sit at the piano and play, letting the notes flow without expectation or judgment. These sessions became opportunities for reflection, growth, and renewal. She explored new variations, experimented with dynamics, and allowed her emotions to guide her fingers. Each time, she discovered something new, whether it was a subtle change in tone, a more expressive pause, or a moment of pure inspiration. The music remained alive, constantly evolving with her. Through all of this, she realized the importance of sharing. While personal growth was essential, the act of offering music to others created a different kind of fulfillment. She found joy in watching listeners respond, in noticing how a simple melody could spark emotion, thought, and connection. The journey from a quiet practice room to sharing music with others had taught her that art, in its truest form, was not just about personal satisfaction, but about the relationships and experiences it could create. As she continued to play, teach, and perform, she felt a deep sense of purpose. Music had become more than a hobby or interest. It was a way of life, a method of understanding herself and connecting with the world. The simple piano melody that had started as a quiet experiment had grown into a lifelong companion, a source of joy, and a symbol of courage, creativity, and growth. In the end, she understood that every note, every variation, and every moment of practice was valuable. The journey had taught her resilience, patience, creativity, and the power of expression. The simple melody had become a testament to the transformative power of dedication and heart. And as she looked forward, she knew that the piano, the music, and the lessons learned would continue to guide her, inspire her, and create moments of glory, both for herself and for anyone who listened.